Hello, welcome to the State Archives and Public Records Administration's webinar on records management, an overview for busy managers. This short webinar is aimed to enable state and local government agencies to quickly become familiar with the essential benefits and requirements of good records and information management. First, just a few words about who we are. The State Archives is a division within the Department of State, the Office of the Secretary of State. As you can see, the division does many things, but all of them are related to the management of records and information of state and local government, both in the short and over the long term. This webinar is available to provide advice to government agencies on the management of their paper records, information, and records in all other media. We operate under several main acts in the state statutory government. First, under Rhode Island General Law 38, second, under 38-3, the Public Records Administration, and third, Rhode Island General Law 42-8.1, the State Archives and Historical Records Act. This presentation is broken up into 6 primary categories. By the end of this webinar, you should be more familiar with the why and how of implementing a good records management program in your agency. You will become more familiar with the responsibilities that the state law places on the State Archives Division and state and local government agencies for the management and care of Rhode Island's public records. We will look at how to comply with the requirement of our state's laws and also how to manage your records in a way that strengthens your organization. Ultimately, good records management depends on everyone, and this webinar will provide advice, do's and don'ts, and get you started on the path to proper records management. As government agencies become more interdependent, the management of recorded communications and information are becoming more crucial than ever before. And this cannot happen without effective collaboration among all partners. So as we walk through this presentation, we're going to begin with definitions. We're going to explore why records management, the importance of records in you and what your role is, the outcomes, what records retention and implementation looks like, and how we can help. The most important definition throughout this presentation is what I have a public record. If you define public business, that answers the key question. Records means records made or received by any governmental agency in their daily public business and preserved or appropriate for preservation by the agency or its successor. Concrete examples of public records may be briefing notes, policies, reports, and recommendations, business deliverables, agendas and meeting minutes, documents that result in a decision or result in the implementation of a new policy or activity, documents that require a signature, or materials that are required to support a financial, administrative, or legal audit. Now, those are only a few examples of public records, but it gives you the idea of what we mean when we talk about public business. When you're looking at the records that you are both creating and receiving in your office on your day-to-day, ask yourself these 3 main questions. 1, do the contents concern public business? Is it reflective of your mission and how you serve the public? 2, does it serve a public function? Is it one of the main roles that you serve? Is it something that demonstrates the step-by-step and day-to-day maintenance of your office and your role in government? And 3, whose office is it from? Sometimes records that may seem to be less vital may have a longer retention depending on whose office it may be from. Now that we've talked about in an overview of the different types of public records verbally, I also wanted to include something more visual to give you a firmer understanding of the fact that public records can come in many shapes and sizes. Correspondence can be paper, a letter that you've received from a constituent, email, or text documents. It also includes spreadsheets, maps, calendars, sound recordings of meetings. All of these things can come together and be a public record. The important thing to remember is no matter what you're creating, how you're creating it, and even in what form it's made, you need to define the record upon the function, and that is what is identified in the records retention schedule that we'll continue to speak about throughout this presentation. What is records management? Records management is a field of organization and management. It is best utilized for policies, strategies, and plans every day. Records management encompasses the proper care and maintenance of public records for their entire life cycle. The life cycle of a record breaks down into 4 primary steps: create or receive, use and file, transfer and store, which is the active management of a record before you reach step 4, which is disposition. Disposition can break down into a few different ways: either destruction, if it has reached an age where it is legally eligible for destruction, or permanent preservation. This decision is made based on its historical, legal, or other value, and the tool we call a retention schedule is the way to establish those retentions and destruction eligibilities. As we look at this slide, it breaks down records management into these 3 primary categories. Records management is a very complex and important process, but these at least highlight a foundational understanding. Management of records and information that support business interests and define the actions of an organization. It is the classification, filing, storage, retention, and disposition, as we stated, and the care of records, which means not only that the records are present and kept, but that they are readable, that they are able to be opened and used by anyone now or in the future as they're still being retained. So what is records management leads us into our next question. Why records management? Records management is a snapshot and it provides transparency. We manage public records because they provide evidence, they enhance transparency, they ensure continuity, they protect the rights of the state and its constituents, they promote and document decision making, and they preserve institutional memory. Rhode Island general law provides the why for document preservation, but goods records management benefits you every day and your work, not just legal compliance. Records management makes good sense for agencies to develop because from a business point of view, a properly established records management plan can be a very effective business tool. Records management is a responsibility, it provides legal protection, and it assists in daily business. There are so many advantages and benefits to public records and well-kept public records and sound agency record-keeping practices, and that lays the groundwork for democratic accountability, the transparency and public trust, and it helps sustain efficient operations. It also serves to advance goals, protect rights and benefits, and finally, to help ensure that we are well-grounded in that institutional memory that we touched on before. All of these together give the umbrella effect of that records management is not just about filing away a paper, but about preserving actions and memory of our role as a state. Speaking of our role as a state, what is the role that you serve as an individual within a state agency? As an agency, your role is proper and accessible preservation, and each agency is accountable for the establishment of a program to properly maintain these records. As an individual staff member within an agency, you bear some responsibility for the management of records that you create in order to conduct agency business, to understand your records, the function, and their value. And you play a role in assisting your agency in compliance of maintaining those records for the entire life cycle. As you look through what responsibility means, it breaks down into creating complete records and preserving complete records. Our next question that we're going to cover is, what is your team's role? Your staff should be knowledgeable about records management in general, but also as it breaks down and is pertinent to your agency. As we focus on records, it's important to know which records require permanent retention i.e. those records that cannot be destroyed, and those that are non-permanent. Records with non-permanent retention requirements, how long to retain them is a question of legal compliance and also active business needs. The primary tool for identifying which type of record a record is the records retention schedule. We will go into records retention schedules more in depth, but first I'll explore briefly the two types that we focus on. Number one is the general retention schedule. This is the records retention schedule type that breaks down records and documents that can be created by any agency throughout the state of Rhode Island. Records that are consistent, such as personnel or fiscal records. The second type of records retention schedule we call an agency-specific schedule. This schedule focuses on those types of records that are only created by a specific agency. For example, a record that DEM may create is not the same type of record that DLT would create. So we have these specific schedules to help maintain and ensure that all records created by the state of Rhode Island are accurately and appropriately destroyed as per the needs of the specific agency. We dispose of these records based on the value, both historical and legal, and we also focus on the fiscal. And all three of those things together help us define the records retention. The records retention schedule is also your best friend for organizing, as this slide talks about, and identify, organizing, classify, and maintaining records because it assists you very dynamically with your file naming. It is your first stop tool for records retention. Records management has the ability to aid and improve workflow, but lack of records management puts you and your agency at risk. On this slide, we're exploring the outcomes of poor records management, and it results in 5 primary negative outcomes. The first is the inability to properly perform a core mission. The second, inability to resume operations after a disaster. The third, legal penalties. The fourth, public distrust. And the fifth is cost of remediation of damaged records that have not yet met retention. So who's accountable for keeping and protecting the integrity of these records? It's us. It is you as a member of a public agency. It is the employee's job to continue to ensure the protection of these records. There's a really wonderful resource that I'm going to share with you called the 10 Commandments of Records Management. And it breaks down primarily into these categories. As you're working on records management, you identify, you create, you maintain, you remove or destroy in a timely manner, you keep official records, you make someone responsible for an overall records program, you transfer, you protect records that are maybe classified or closed, and then you do all of these things in a manner that is cost effective. So rather than face these outcomes of poor records management, if we follow those 10 principles, we will continue to have successful and compliant programs in records management. As we mentioned on a previous slide, here we're going to cover records retention. Most state and local governments have the 2 types of schedules we mentioned earlier, also number 2 on this slide, which is general or agency specific. Now our general schedules are available on our website at sos.ri.gov under records management, and you'll see 9 general records retention schedules for state agencies, 14 for local government, and then there's a separate link for agency specific schedules. A general retention schedule addresses kinds of records that all government agencies create in the pursuit of their missions, from financial records to payroll to personnel. The State Archives has established retentions for all of these. If you are looking through these schedules and notice something that may be missing or you have a question, you can reach out to us and we will adapt that schedule, we will draft a revision, and we will update it as needed so that it accurately reflects the records created and maintained by the state. In contrast, agency-specific schedules cover those exclusively created by state agencies and aren't covered under the general retention schedule. The state agency schedules are still written with the assistance of the Public Records Administration and the State Archives. We work hand in hand with state agencies to draft these and then approve them with the assistance of the Auditor General and the Attorney General. Rules of thumb here is when you are working with a records retention schedule, it provides you with the names of records through records series. These are excellent tools for file naming, both for digital and physical records, and will also assist you in the future for destruction of these records if it is named the same in your file folder as it is on your records retention schedule. When you're using file naming, you want to create a structure. And as your records retention schedule can assist with that, here are also some additional key points. You want to keep file names short and meaningful. Many of the record series are perfect for this, and they'll continue to be your best friend when you're going through this process. You can use the name of the record series and then use the alphanumeric principle to then add the date in. For example, GRS 1.1A underscore 2010 would be a very identifiable name that would assist with destruction. You want to put the most important information first. Include a version number if this is a record that may not be a permanent copy. And then don't overwrite file extensions. Continue to make those new drafts. Now this is just a brief key when using your retention schedule for file naming, but it will assist you in having identifiable records now and into the future for yourself and those who may need it later on. On this slide, we're just going to run through an example of what the records retention schedule looks like. In breaking down the schedule, you can find all of these elements. First, a record series number. In the top left corner of this slide, you will see a small circle that says FB1. That is the record series number. To the right of this is the record series name, which gives a longer description of what is going to come below. The record series description is the box of text below, and that goes through and explains the function of the record that falls under this record series number and name. We give this record series description because it is often much more prudent to include a longer description in lieu of a specific name of a form or a document, because other documents may be created in the future that fit the function and description described there. Below the record series description, you will see in the shaded blue box the retention period, which is how long it must be kept. In this third element, you're going to see that there are sometimes triggers. So we've included an example here that has a trigger, which is 10 years after the conclusion of the code cycle. Some retentions are specific dates, as in destruction eligible after 3 years. But for those that have a trigger, you wait until the clock starts ticking on that trigger. Once those 10 years come and go, then that record is eligible for destruction. Throughout this webinar, we've been leading up to the legal process of records destruction. This slide breaks down the essential 3 pieces of how you go through and legally destroy a public record created by your agency. It's available in our regulation, which you can find at sos.ri.gov under Managing Government Records, and we're also going to break it down right here. So as we use the records retention schedule, you will find identified throughout the whole schedule distinct record series. As you go through and review these series, these are the pieces of information required for the Certificate of Records Destruction. You are going to use that form provided to you by the State Archives and Public Records Administration to identify the records you are ready to destroy. You will include this record series on the form, the date it was created, which tells us if it's reached maturity and is in fact eligible, and include all relevant information identified on the form. Then you will have your agency head or a designated representative sign this form and send it to a representative here at the State Archives and Public Records Administrator. It will then be reviewed by our team here and signed by the State Archivist, and then will be returned to you at your agency. Once it has been countersigned and returned to you, it is at that point that you can go through with proper destruction of these records. If you would like additional information on what we consider proper destruction, as in recycling versus shredding, we break that down and we do have advice, and it really comes down to what is needed based on the content of the record. So please feel free to reach out with questions regarding that. Another note on records destruction, the State Archives and Public Records Administration works with agencies with the State Records Center. If you have off-site records stored at the State Records Center, our team here will actually create a certificate of records destruction for you based upon the inventory you have stored there. They will send a recommended certificate to you of records that are eligible based upon the data in our database. You will then go through the process identified on the slide, have it reviewed by your own agency, signed by a designee, and then returned to us for final signature prior to carrying out destruction. And then our team will file in order for that destruction to happen at the State Records Center. Either way, whether you're destroying records on site for yourself or if you're destroying records that are currently at the State Records Center, it requires the Certificate of Records Destruction, which becomes the legal permanent replacement for any record that you dispose of. Next, we're going to explore implementation and organizing your files. What are the main considerations for storage is one of the largest questions we receive when sharing about records management. So on this slide, we have a few key elements of do's and don'ts. Do folder records, label them according to your retention schedule, and use standardized storage, such as letter in legal sized folders that go into letter in legal sized boxes that are 1.2 cubic feet. Our general advice for do nots is 1, do not store loose unidentified files. You don't want to have just a pile of unidentified paper. 2, do not just keep everything. You want to organize and understand what it is you're retaining. And 3, do not use odd or overly large boxes. They are cumbersome to lift and they also are difficult to preserve properly. Two rules of thumb that can assist you in this is if you're packing a box, 1, can you lift it? And 2, as you're packing it itself, you want to pack like with like. For example, a single record series of a single year in one box will be much easier to destroy than a single box with 8 record series with different retentions, because the retention on the record with the longest time period, all of the records will have to be kept that amount of time if the box is to be destroyed all at once. Now, the big question we often receive is, can't we just keep it all? Current wisdom says no, because if we just keep it all, you're passing along to successors the responsibility or cost of storing and maintaining the integrity of records that may have long passed their useful purpose. It can also affect legal implications in that if you keep record longer than necessary, you are required to legally maintain it in readable format and also provide it to the public upon asking. So if you maintain an active records management program and destroy things in a timely manner in the proper form, if you are asked for a record that was eligible for destruction, you can provide that certificate of records destruction, which is the permanent legal replacement for the file, without maintaining dozens and dozens and hundreds of files that have been eligible for destruction because they are no longer needed for business. Moving past organizing your files, these permanent records require more attention and different housings that benefit records lasting much, much longer. So these records, the State Archives typically preserves in acid-free folders and boxes that will continue to protect the record as well as preserve it. As we move forward from permanent preservation, our next slide is really how we help as the State Archives and Public Records Administration. The first is with your records retention schedule. As mentioned previously, we assist your agency in the creation of the schedule and provide guidance on the use of the schedule for best records management. We assist in the provision of off-site record storage and guidance on on-site storage for your own offices. We provide on-site agency-specific workshops and assistance and records management policy preview and guidance. Essentially, we are here to provide the education and guidance on how to best implement a records management plan to help you have best practice in your office. In review, you and your team should be able to establish accountability for the identification and safekeeping of all public records in order to properly document or provide evidence of agency activities. We should all know the content and function, not the medium, determine whether a document is a public record, and that public records exist in any format. Understand that identifying and organizing non-permanent and permanent record agency records lies at the heart of effective information and records management. You should be able to attend to the timely disposal of eligible non-permanent records and develop appropriate safeguards, preservation policies, strategies, and procedures for long-term and permanent preservation of records and information. Each of these things is broken down under everything under number 2 on this slide. Accountability, maintenance, the use of retention schedules, timely disposal, and preservation. Each of those requires several steps, which is why a records management policy or plan is an essential tool in your records management toolkit. If you have any questions or would like additional information on records management and creating a records management plan, retention schedule, or anything else covered throughout this presentation, you can contact the State Archives and Public Records Administration by calling 401-222-2353 or emailing records@sos.ri.gov. Thank you for watching this webinar. Please use the contact information here for questions on the schedule or to schedule an on-site training. We look forward to hearing from you.